The bizarre thing right now is that as I'm writing this and recording this soon after the combine, if you ask people if Johnson was one of the best backs in the class, there might be a few that actually say no. So what happened after he had so much hype these past few months? Well, he didn't have a blazing 40-yard dash time, which that time was 4.57. Yeah, that's what people are freaking out about. A 40 in the 4.5s for a 6'1 back who weighs 224 pounds. I'm sorry, I just thought we were past the part where we would freak out about 40 times instead of trusting what we see on the film. Hey y'all! For this video, we'll be continuing going through the 2025 running back prospects and covering Jaquavius Woody Marks from USC, Kaleb Johnson from Iowa, Kalel Mullings from Michigan, Kyle Monangai from Rutgers, and LeQuint Allen from Syracuse. If you're new to these, my running back evals use some different grading methods, which if you want more details on these, you can check them out on part 1 of the series, which should be accessible with the link that should be on the screen now, as I have more details on that and how I do my grading. Also, if you want to check out my grades and evals of the running backs from last year for reference, you can check them out with the link that should be in the description. For any new viewers, I have evals and full scan reports out for Ashton Genty, Bashal Toon, Cam Scadaboo, Damian Martinez, Devin Neal, DJ Giddens, Dylan Sampson, Jordan James, and many more if you want to check them out on my channel as well. I'll be continuing going through my top 35 running backs in the draft, so be sure you don't miss any other parts of the running back series and any other position group series in the future. Be sure to subscribe. Now let's first take a look at marks. Also, before we get started, as I mentioned in my previous videos, I'm a contributor for DLF or DynastyLeagueFootball.com. If you haven't used DLF or want to try to use their premium service, new users can use my discount code BACKSEAT99 in all caps to sign up for DLF Premium for just 99 cents for the first month. That will give you access to all the articles, rankings, tools, and more. Now, I've also mentioned this before, but I always want to make sure I do repeat this just to make it clear. That makes DLF Premium 99 cents for the first month. And if you don't like it, you can cancel it within that first month and not be charged more than 99 cents. But if you do forget to cancel it after the first month, or you just want to continue having it and using it, it'll be $12.99 every month after the first month. Starting with Mark's basic stats, he was very productive on the ground and in the air. On the ground, he rushed for 1,133 yards and 9 touchdowns on 198 carries for a yards per carry of 5.7, while also having just a single fumble that honestly wasn't really his fault since it was on a broken play. As a pass catcher, he was very busy, making 47 receptions for 321 yards. Looking at the highlight games against Nebraska, Penn State, Michigan, and LSU, he was productive in all of them. Also, you can show that he can be regularly counted on in those games as he had at least 18 touches in all those games. In fact, outside the season finale against Notre Dame, Marks never had less than 16 touches per game, which is really impressive and shows that he can be counted on if a team needs him to play the majority of the game. In terms of his impact during the game, Marks rushed for at least 100 yards in nearly all of the highlighted games other than the LSU matchup, and had at least 2 receptions all of them as well. Also, he wasn't just getting a couple yards on most passes, as he averaged at least 6 yards per reception in all the highlighted games other than against LSU again. So from a production and dependability standpoint, Marks can clearly get it done. So now let's see if the grades align with that production. For his contact balance and elusiveness, he has good shiftiness to give him a chance to be able to make defenders miss in space. He also has good movement ability to move around the field in open space. If defenders do get him squared up, he has good awareness to make adjustments to help minimize the hit and help preserve himself to be able to play another down. However, Marks does have pretty poor contact balance and is taken down by the first tackler way too frequently. For reference, a lot of the best backs in the class have a carries per missed tackle rate of about 3 to 4. Marks, though, has a rate of 5.8, which is among the worst of the draftable running backs. Part of the issue is the hesitancy that he has around the line of scrimmage, and that he can get sometimes stuck dancing around the line as he tries to look for a hole, which can kill his forward momentum and make him way too easy to tackle. If he's not being hesitant, he will also often be too upright of a runner, who will often have his legs freeze with contact. That all combines to having little to no drive in short yardage situations, and very few times they can finish runs going forward. If he was more elusive, then it would be easier to look past this. However, though he is shifty, he wasn't able to shake defenders off as frequently as I would have liked. I think part of the issue is that his cuts sometimes just don't have enough explosiveness to be able to consistently get defenders to miss. Also, his lack of peripheral awareness to be able to avoid ankle tackles from behind also play a part in him being able to be taken down way too easily. So with some really disappointing contact balance, Marks earned just a D+ for his contact balance. His elusiveness was much better though and earned him a B-. For his receiver and pass blocking, he's a fantastic pass catcher and is up there as one of the best pass catchers in the class. He has a history of handling significant volume as a pass catcher and can run routes from the slot and out wide. He also has great hands and looks very comfortable tracking the ball, and he's capable of extending to the end of his frame and even make one-handed catches. Once he makes the catch, he has a very fluid transition from pass catcher to rusher with minimal wasted movement or hesitation. I was also really pleasantly surprised by his pass blocking. Now, it certainly isn't what I would consider to be great by any means, but it's much better than I expected. He'll typically set a good base and does a good job getting square with his target, and he'll often use his hands instead of just leading with his shoulder like a lot of other smaller backs tend to do. Also, his veteran experience shows with his recognition skills and finding his assignment. However, while his pass blocking is better than I expected, there are still a number of areas that he can still work on to be able to clean it up. He typically does have a good approach to his target, but will often lunge and leave his feet, which lead to poor quality blocks. When he does set a good base, he has poor timing with his hip roll, leading to a weaker punch. That weak punch and poor use of leverage leads to him having a poor anchor. Also, while he ran a number of routes from the slot out wide, he is rarely targeted, which makes it questionable if he can really do this reliably in the NFL. So despite Marks maybe not being able to be counted as a contributor at receiver spots, his pass catching skills were still really impressive and earned him an A-. Also, his pass blocking skills were impressive and earned a B-. For his vision and ball handling, he has a good eye for cutback lanes and has good bursts to be able to cut through and break through those openings. Other than that though, his vision is really rough and one of the biggest things that has stopped me from buying into him in the past. There were just too many times when I was confused why he took a certain path or just froze behind the line of scrimmage. When things get too congested, he just gets way too indecisive and hesitant to make a decision that doesn't involve a massive cutback. I feel part of the issue is he's hunting for the home run plays too often and just need to be more willing to take what the defense gives him. When he is trying to be more decisive, he really struggles to read the leverage of his blocks and doesn't hug his blocks consistently enough. Two things I think could really help is pressing the line of scrimmage more and running more tempo in his runs. Both of these could create more openings for him and make life a lot easier for him. That being said, his ball security is extremely impressive, especially considering that some shifty smaller backs tend to have a high number of fumbles, but Marks does a great job protecting the ball with just 2 fumbles in the last 3 seasons on 550 touches, and again, that 1 fumble this year being on a broken play, which again, I don't know if we should really count towards him. So with some major deficits in his vision, Marks earned just a D+ for his vision. However, with his great ability to be able to hold onto the ball, he earned an A- for ball handling. For his future role and athleticism or RAS, he has a good floor to at least be a good third down back in the NFL. He's a very good pass catcher who is even able to hold up and help out in pass protection. So many times I feel like I'm saying, yeah, this guy is a good pass catcher, but he can't block to save his life, so he may not getting playing time in those situations. But Marks is good at both, making him a good option on third down. In terms of being capable of more than that, it is tough. He is shifty, but he just has good, not great athleticism, and really struggles breaking tackles, and has some real deficits with his vision that impacts him in being able to pick up yards on the ground. That doesn't give him a very high ceiling as a rusher, and may limit his usage to being purely a third down back. Which is good that he can still fit a role, but it is kind of a niche thing which could limit the number of teams that would want to target him. So due to at least being able to contribute as a third down back, Marks earned a C+ for his future role grade. Also with just likely average, maybe slightly above average athleticism, he earned a yellow flag for his athleticism or RAS. For a summary of his strengths, Marks has some deficiencies in his vision but has a great eye for cutback lanes. Also, he's pretty shifty, which when that is combined with his eye for cutback lanes, makes him a great fit for zone schemes. He can also do it all on third down as he has great hands and receiving ability, but can also protect the quarterback as a blocker. Finally, you won't have to worry about him turning over the ball since he does a great job holding onto it, with very few fumbles over these past 3 seasons. However, while he is a good pass catcher, he's really disappointing as a rusher. He has a poor eye for leverage and is too indecisive around the line of scrimmage. His indecisiveness also contributes to his poor contact balance and difficulties getting pushed on the line of scrimmage. Finally, while he is shifty, he struggles to make defenders miss in open space, which is really disappointing and again makes it really difficult for him to avoid any type of tackle. So by taking the average of all his grades, Marks earned a 2.52 out of 4, which falls in my may have a future role tier. Marks feels like a player who could be a part-time running back and a primary receiver or receiving back type of player. I just keep feeling pretty underwhelmed and frustrated when I watch him, which makes it hard to be excited about him despite his receiving ability. I wouldn't be surprised if a number of teams will view Marks in a traditional role and want to pursue other backs. However, it just takes one team or one coordinator to recognize they can work so much better if you just use him primarily in pass-catching situations. That is a very limited outlook for him, but I do think it's the best chance for him to have a career in the NFL. At 24 years old, I don't expect him to suddenly improve his vision and contact balance overnight and before he's on the wrong side at 25. So it's important to leverage his strengths and let him do what he does best. As for a comp, I have Theo Riddick as Marks' comp. Neither Riddick or Marks are good runners, but are very good pass catchers. Both are very comfortable catching the ball with their hands and running routes both out of the backfield and from receiver spots. However, neither show good vision or contact balance to be reliable rushers, which does require them to fit into very specific roles. Riddick surprised many with the productive career he had as a pass catcher, but he is an example of what happens if a team is willing to just let a player play to their strengths. If a team does do the same with Marks, I don't think it's out of the question that he could have similar production as a pass catcher. However, it again comes down to if a team is looking for a very specific type of receiving back like Marks. Now moving to our next back, and one of the best backs in the class, Kaleb Johnson from Iowa. Looking at his basic stats, Johnson was awesome on the ground this year, rushing for 1,537 yards and 21 touchdowns on 240 carries for a yards per carry of 6.4 yards. For those who haven't watched Iowa's offense, they basically didn't have an offense, and I don't blame you for not watching it, since it was pretty ugly at times. Their quarterback play was awful, so teams knew all they had to do was stop Johnson. So despite teams knowing to key in on Johnson, it was still incredibly impressive that Johnson still managed to put up numbers he did despite everything working against him. As a pass catcher, he wasn't quite as impressive with just 22 receptions for 188 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is still solid, but it is worth knowing that nearly half of those yards came on a single touchdown reception against Nebraska. So with his yardage outside of that being relatively low, he was mostly getting it around the line of scrimmage. Speaking of that Nebraska game and his other highlighted games against Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Iowa State, his Nebraska game was one of his worst games this season with just 45 yards rushing on 17 carries, but he's pretty good in the rest of the games. His game against Ohio State started out rough since the defense was occupying basically every hole, but he still managed to put up 86 yards and a touchdown on 15 carries. His games against Wisconsin and Iowa State were more of the regular Kaleb Johnson experience, with him putting up 135 rushing yards on 24 carries against Wisconsin and 187 rushing yards on 25 carries against Iowa State. So, to see how good he is if those were really the regular types of games he would typically have, let's start to take a look at some of his grades. For his contact balance and elusiveness, he runs a great pad level and brings a lot of pop to the initial hit to drive back his defender and get them off balance. He also does a good job keeping his legs moving constantly to help finish his runs going forward. Despite not being afraid of contact, he has good awareness of how to adjust his body before contact to lessen the blow. The decreased impact and his great balance and leg strength helped him stay upright and pick up additional yards on the ground. That being said, I'd like to see Johnson have a little bit more creativity in open space as a runner. He can sometimes default to just relying on his speed to outrun the defender, instead of making a move to make them miss in open space. I do have the concern that he may lack twitch and fluidity to routinely make defenders miss in open field, and a slight stiffness when trying to change direction doesn't make that fear go away. So to start things off on a high note, Johnson earned an A- for his contact balance and a B for his elusiveness. For his receiving and pass blocking, he didn't have a lot of opportunities on passing downs, but did show good hands and even looked comfortable catching away from his frame in his few opportunities. Also, he has a surprisingly smooth transition from receiver to runner. He did have limited reps as a pass blocker and will need to work on this. However, he did typically do a good job staying on his feet and not having poor lunges or whiffs when he is able to get his target square. That being said, as we'll see later, his pass blocking grade is his lowest grade for a reason. It shows a lot of the growing pains from his limited opportunities and looks like a player who has only had 52 pass block opportunities in his career like Johnson has. We can theorize whether he can become a good pass blocker or not, but Johnson more times than not being subbed out on passing downs shows that at least the Iowa coaching staff wasn't confident in his ability to hold up in those situations. As far as what he did in those limited opportunities, he can be slow in identifying his assignment, which can lead him to start to scramble. That affects his base, leading to it being too narrow and sometimes stop him from being able to get square with his target. When he does get square, his hand placement and timing with his hip roll are still lacking, leading to him being more of a speed bump than a roadblock. It's just really disappointing because he has the size and strength to be a good pass blocker, but he's just so far behind right now due to his limited reps. Also, his limited reps can show in his hand technique when making catches, leading to some double catches. His lack of experience also shows as a route runner, as he's run some pretty sloppy routes that lack good cuts and nuance. I'd also like to see him have better awareness to be able to find open space and make himself a more QB-friendly target. So though there were limited opportunities to go off of for both, I do believe he does deserve a B- for his receiving, but also likely deserves a C- for his pass blocking. For his vision and ball handling, he shows great awareness of angles and knows how to take the most efficient path to separate from defenders and get upfield. His innate feel for blocks at the second level also lets him break off bigger gains more consistently than backs who've often struggled to set their blocks to the line of scrimmage. He also has great burst and is able to get skinny through closing holes to be able to make the most of his less than ideal situations. Now, he did do the majority of his damage in zone runs this year, but he still looked good in the gap runs that he was given the opportunity to run. Also, he does have a good build and skill set that should translate to an NFL team that has more of a gap-heavy scheme. That being said, he will need to prove to NFL teams that he can handle that. Also, when he struggles to find an opening, he can either default to bouncing the run outside and skipping possible cutback lanes or ducking his head and trying to drive through the line instead of looking for an opening. Finally, he had 0 fumbles this year, which was really great to see that he can hold onto the ball despite an increased workload. So with some great vision, but just a little bit of a question mark of how he fit into a gap scheme, Johnson earned a B+ for his vision. For his ball handling, he earned an A due to avoiding any fumbles for the 2024 season. For his future role in athleticism or RAS, he at the very least looks like a great 2-down back. Johnson has fantastic size, vision, contact balance, ball security, burst, and enough speed to be a very effective rusher in the NFL. The bizarre thing right now is that as I'm writing this and recording this soon after the combine, if you ask people if Johnson was one of the best backs in the class, there might be a few that actually say no. So what happened after he had so much hype these past few months? Well, he didn't have a blazing 40-yard dash time, which that time was 4.57. Yeah, that's what people are freaking out about. A 40 in the 4.5s for a 6'1 back who weighs 224 pounds. I'm sorry, I just thought we were past the part where we would freak out about 40 times instead of trusting what we see on the film. Unfortunately, I guess we aren't, since people are using that 40 time as a reason to drop him in rankings, which I just think is silly. If you watch his film, he can still clearly separate from defenders, has enough speed to get consistent gains. Plus, I think we should know by now that speed in underwear and speed in pads on the field are not the same. Did he have a great 40 time? No. Is he a perfect prospect? Definitely not. But let's focus on things that actually impact his ability to get on the field and not just on a measure that has been proven to be fluky at times. So if we actually want to focus on things that matter more, his pass-catching background is a bit questionable, and he needs to prove he can handle more volume in NFL to not be subbed out on passing downs, especially with his poor pass blocking. He also needs to prove that he can translate his vision to heavy gap schemes, since he primarily ran out of zone runs in college. However, he won't need to prove that he can protect the ball, since that was on display in 2024 with no fumbles, and should at least help him keep on the field without having to worry about turnovers. So the clear fit on early downs with questionable fit on passing downs, Johnson earned a B- for his future role. For his athleticism and RAS, Johnson earned a yellow flag and not a red flag like some people want to suggest. For a summary of his strengths, he has fantastic contact balance and great size to continue to survive tackles and get extra yards in the NFL. Despite his larger size, he's able to get skinny through tight creases and burst through to the second level. Once he's out on the second level, he can quickly read and set his blocks to extend his runs. With that combination of size, strength, vision, and enough speed, Johnson can be a regular home run threat for offenses. Finally, he could be even more of a weapon if he proved that he can handle more volume in a passing game, as he showed some promise in 2024. That being said, the hope that he can handle more passing volume is primarily optimism, since he hasn't proven it in his limited opportunities. He also had limited opportunities in pass protection since he was a liability in those situations, and will need to work to at least be an average blocker since there are no excuses at his size. Also, he had limited gap runs and will need to prove he can handle gap runs in the NFL. He'll also need to find a better way at making defenders miss in the open field, since he can seem a bit stiff when trying to change direction. Finally, there were too many times when he was settled for short gains and just ducking his head or bouncing runs outside when things got too congested in the middle. So by taking the average of all his grades, Johnson earned a 3 out of 4, which just barely falls into my good starter tier. Johnson's a back who is easy to make a clear argument of why he will succeed in the NFL. He has good athleticism, good vision, impressive contact balance, and he proved he can carry an offense like he did at Iowa. However, I do think there are some red flags that people should discuss more rather than just his 40 time. His home run threat ability is great, but he is very much just a one-cut runner at times and lacks the ability to make defenders miss in the open field, which is a necessity in the NFL to break off big gains like he did in college. Also, while he may be able to be counted on more as a pass catcher, he will likely be a liability as a blocker until he improves in that area. Finally, while he should translate to a gap scheme, we need to see it to believe it. If even one of those things follows him to the NFL, it will likely limit him more than a lot of people are willing to admit, and will limit him more than that 40 time. That being said, I do still like him a lot, and I might even like him more than consensus now, with the way that public perception on him has shifted. However, I felt people were rushing to the conclusion penciling him as an RB2 prior to the combine, so this might just be part of averaging out to where he really should be valued. As for a comp, I have Melvin Gordon as Johnson's comp. Both Gordon and Johnson carried their offenses and were home run threats. Both also have great in-game acceleration and burst to get to full speed quickly and cover a lot of ground in instants. They both also have a lot of strength and great balance to help keep them stay up after initial hits and pick up extra yards on the ground. Also, both weren't used as much as receivers in college, but they show some potential with their hands. However, both also showed a lot of trouble as pass blockers, which could limit those opportunities. Both were also one-cut runners, which can sometimes cause them to have tunnel vision. Both could also use more creativity in open space and not just rely on their speed. Also, both disappointed fans at their combine with 40 times in the 4.5s, but have plenty of speed to be successful in the NFL. While Gordon had more ball security issues that impact him in college and the NFL, Johnson does a great job holding on to ball. That improved ball security should help him get more reps and get more experience in the passing areas of the field to be able to improve his current areas of improvement to work towards becoming a more complete back. Going to our next back, Kalel Mullings from Michigan. After converting from linebacker to running back in 2023, Mullings broke out in 2024, stealing the lead back role from Donovan Edwards. With this new role, Mullings was the bruiser on early downs, rushing for 948 yards and 12 touchdowns on 185 carries, which equals out to a yards per carry of 5.1. The impressive thing is that despite being new to the running back position, he did a very good job protecting the ball and had no fumbles in 2024. Unfortunately, he hasn't quite figured out the catching the football part yet, as he has only targeted 8 times in his 2024 season and making 6 receptions for 35 yards in those opportunities. When looking at his highlighted games against Ohio State, Oregon, Illinois, and USC, he never really made flashy plays or had high yards per carry against quality opponents other than USC, which, to be fair, considering them a quality defense is probably being generous, but they were ranked at the time, and Mullings didn't get enough playing time early on in the season to feel like it was fair to include his Texas game. But other than the clear absence of receiving production, the other thing that jumps out to me is Mullings' lack of involvement against Oregon. In that game, Michigan was playing from behind for the majority of the game, which made Mullings less useful and conceded snaps. That's one of my biggest concerns for Mullings, is that he's so limited how he can be used and he could be taken off for passing downs, but to know for sure, let's take a look to see how he graded in all his areas. For his contact balance and elusiveness, he has great size and strength to plow through defenders. He has such great drive and constantly keeps his legs moving to be very successful in short yardage situations. In those short yardage situations, he understands his assignment and focuses efforts on going forward, either getting the first down or scoring. That being said, he does lack great speed and quickness to regularly make defenders miss in open space. Also, limited experience at the position does show when he's in open space. It seems to be lacking in moves he can pull off to make defenders miss. That lack of experience also shows with him often having poor timing with those moves that he does try to pull off, which makes that all combined to making it near impossible for him to make defenders miss. Finally, while he does love to plow through defenders, I would like to see him work on finding ways to adjust his body before impact to help preserve himself, as well as making it easier to slide off tackles. So with his bully ball mentality, Mullings earned an A- for his contact balance. That being said, with a lot of difficulties to make defenders miss, he earned just a D+ for his elusiveness. For his receiving and pass blocking, I'm hoping his pass catching ability continues to improve, but he did have reliable hands and caught the ball with good hand technique in his few targets. Also, he showed good awareness to move with his quarterback when the quarterback broke from the pocket. His pass protection is pretty impressive with his limited experience as well. He has impressive recognition skills to find his assignment and will often get square with them. He also does a good job using his hands and has active eyes since he's always eager to lay a hit on a defender. Despite his technique issues, his strength shows in his pass protection and he has a great anger thanks to his strength and size. As he got more playing time as the season went on, his pass blocking got noticeably better, which does bode well for continued development. While I expect him to play running back, he did also show versatility as a fullback, which could excite teams as a fallback plan if running back doesn't work out for him. That being said, while his hands were reliable, his routes were really sloppy and do have bad cuts. He also has a very limited route tree, and it's hard to envision him running more than screen and swing passes right now. Also, he can be a bit awkward and have a bit of a hitch when he turns upfield after making catches. Those issues and having just 8 career receptions make it really hard to be that optimistic that he'll suddenly turn around and be able to handle more volume as a pass catcher in the NFL. Also, he will need to continue to improve his pass blocking if he wants to play on passing downs, since while he has great strength, he can often compromise it by being too upright as a blocker and not always get his feet set in pass protection. He also needs more experience as a blocker as he can have poor timing with his hip roll leading to a weaker punch. While he has good recognition skills, he isn't always able to break to the other side of the formation quickly enough, which leads to him having trouble getting square with his target and delivering a poor block. Due to lacking a lot of experience in both, he earned just a C- for his receiving and a C+ for his pass blocking. For his vision and ball handling, he does a good job taking what the defense gives him and will use his size and power to guarantee a gain. Despite his size, he does a good job getting skinny through tight creases and looks comfortable running between the tackles. I think he looks more comfortable running in gap runs, but he still is a patient runner in both gap and zone runs and does a good job hugging his blocks. Also, he has enough burst at his size to be able to blast through openings he can find. So while he has limited experience at running back, the strides he's taken and his vision are very encouraging and should only get better. However, on zone runs, he can have a few lapses of misread in the leverage of his blocks and can sometimes miss his cutback lanes. So with the way that he really impressed me with his vision while still being new to the position, he ended up earning a B for me. As I mentioned before, he didn't have any fumbles, so he did end up earning an A for his ball handling as well. For his future role line athleticism, I feel this will be pretty short and sweet since you can pretty much get the vibe just looking at his stats. Mullings is just a 2-down back at this time and will likely be taken off the field on passing downs. Now at the very least, he is a very good runner on early downs thanks to his power and vision. However, his lacking athleticism caps his ceiling and may make it harder for him to stay on the field over backs with more upside. That being said, with him looking good as a fullback in 2024 and having the size, strength, and blocking skills to handle it, I think he could benefit from a switch to fullback if he does want to seek out more playing time. So Mullings having a very specific skill set, he earned just a C- for his future role grade. He didn't do any testing at the combine, so we don't know for sure, but I suspect that he skipped testing because he knew it wouldn't go well, and he looks like a player that matches with a red flag for his athleticism or RAS on film. For a summary of his strengths, he's an extremely physical runner who will never shy away from contact. However, he's not just a thumper as he has really good vision, especially when factoring in how new to the position he is. Also, though he didn't have a lot of opportunities to base it off of, he at least had somewhat reliable hands and also showed good potential in pass protection, especially by the second half of the year. That in all speaks to his ability to quickly pick up things and gives him a chance to maybe exceed expectations. That being said, he is just a very limited player as he has very little ability to be able to escape tackles in open space and has limited athleticism to be able to avoid them and outrun them. He also just has very limited experience as a pass catcher and ran sloppy routes when he did go out for them, which will make it hard to trust him on passing downs. Finally, he needs to improve his eye for cutback lanes and further refine the nuances of his vision with more reps. So by taking the average of all his grades, Mullings earned a 2.52 out of 4, which just barely falls into my may have a future role tier. While it's easy to point to the things Mullings did poorly, I think it is important to remember his limited amount of experience at the position that he has and recognize the things he's already doing at a high level. His great contact balance and vision at least gives him the potential to be a quality 2-down back. If he continues to improve as a pass blocker and show more ability as a pass catcher, he might even be able to be more than that. Either way, there will likely be a market for a 2-down or fullback, and Mullings is one of the better options and should be a good value for anyone who wants to target him on day 3 or even after the draft if he goes that far. As for a comp, I have Jeremy Hill as Mullings' comp. Similar to Mullings, Hill was a unit with great power and contact balance. Neither were productive pass catchers, but they show reliable hands or were quality pass blockers. Also, both showed good vision between the tackles and understood their assignment both in protecting the ball and delivering on short yards to plays. However, neither have great speed and may be contributors at best in the passing game rather than playmakers. Also, both really struggle to make defenders miss, which further limited their playmaking potential. Both are likely limited to being just 2-down backs in the NFL, which could lead teams to want to quickly move on to them to more well-rounded athletes. Injuries and limited upside caused Jeremy Hill to be phased out of the league pretty quickly, so it'll be important for Mullings to continue to develop and show more versatility. Going to our next back, Kaleb Mullings from Rutgers. Taking a look at his basic stats, he had one of the largest workloads of running back groups with 256 carries and 14 receptions. On his carries, he rushed for 1,279 yards, 4 yards per carry of 5, and scored 13 touchdowns, and caught 14 of his targets for just 75 yards and a touchdown. Despite the heavy workload, he managed to not have a single fumble all season, and even managed to make it through his entire college career without a single fumble, which is incredibly impressive. Looking at his highlight games against Illinois, USC, Nebraska, and Virginia Tech, he had solid productivity as a rusher, but often had to sacrifice efficiency as he failed to have 5 or more yards per carry in any of the highlighted games, and only reached that mark twice against quality opponents in 2024. Now, I do think it's worth noting for context that Rutgers' passing game was pretty ineffective, so defenses could just focus on the run game and stuff the running lanes. So while his efficiency wasn't great, Monangai often had to fight for his yards. We also saw a lot of the season production as a pass catcher in these highlighted games with 3 receptions for 23 yards and a touchdown against Illinois, and 3 receptions for 14 yards against USC, and 2 receptions for 18 yards against Nebraska. The problem is that may mask that he only had 43 receiving yards across the rest of his other 8 games. Also, while he had 4 targets against Illinois and USC, he never had more than 2 targets in any of the other games this season, which starts to make it questionable of how much volume he can handle. So these stat lines may indicate that we are continuing this streak and seeing another 2-down back. But to know for sure, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his contact balance elusiveness, he brings such great effort and power to every single run. Despite his smaller stature, he has great drive and push to pick up extra yards through defenders. He also does a good job keeping his legs moving, which helps him finish almost every single run falling forward. His height definitely helps, but he runs with such great pad level, and he has very good balance that leads to him shedding so many tackles even on plays when the defense just breaks through the line. When he's out in the open space, he also has a nice jump cut which he can make and has pretty good timing when he uses this to get defenders off balance and pick up extra yards. However, he can be pretty uncreative in open space and kinda just looks to plow through a defender instead of trying to keep himself clean. Also, he can look a bit stiff at times and unable to make defenders miss in the open a little bit too frequently. So with really great contact balance despite his smaller height, he earned an A-. However, with some difficulties avoiding tackles by making defenders miss, he earned just a C for his elusiveness. For his receiving and pass blocking, while he made the most of his impact in the run game, he did show that he has reliable hands in the few opportunities he was targeted and has a good transition upfield after making the catch. Also, he was often subbed out of passing down plays early in the season, but began to get more opportunities later in the season as the year went on. I try not to storytell too much, but that progression is really encouraging to see and hopefully continues as he enters the NFL. Also, be interested to see if his pass protection continues to improve. At his size, I was pretty impressed with the way he isn't afraid to attack a defender and give them a little bit of pop. Despite that aggression though, he typically does use his hands and does a good job using leverage from a smaller height while setting a good base to hold his block. That being said, similar to his 2024 season stats, he was pretty uninvolved in the passing game throughout his career with just 38 career receptions in 4 years. Some of the players in this class have that many receptions or even more in just their final season alone. In the times he was targeted, he often had trouble tracking the ball, which led to some lapses in his hand technique. Those issues made Monangai more of a body catcher, which makes me worried that his low drop rate this year could be a bit fluky, especially with the few number of targets he got. Also, his routes were pretty sloppy or poor cuts and often looked rushed. That issue in his limited athleticism makes me worry that he'll likely be limited to screen and swing passes only in the NFL. So though Monangai may have the possibility of handling more targets, I'd be pretty surprised this becomes a part of his game. His opportunities on pass downs could also be decreased if he has more struggles in pass protection. While he was good in college, his size could have more issues with his anchor in the NFL against bigger, stronger defenders. Also, he can sometimes get a bit overexcited wanting to give a big hit in protection, and can find himself lunging and not delivering a clean hit. So with limited volume and some questionable traits for receiving, hearing just a C- for his receiving. For pass blocking, while he looked good, due to some mental lapses and the possibility of his size affecting his blocking in the NFL, he earned a B for his pass blocking. For his vision and ball handling, he has a very good eye for cutback lanes and when reading the leverage of his blocks. He also does a really good job getting skinny through tight creases and can hug his blocks. With his smaller size, he can also be a bit harder for defenders to keep track of him with how well he can hug his blocks. That being said, I'd like to see him have a bit more patience as a runner as he can struggle with finding good tempo in his runs. He'll often rush things a bit too much and not give his blocks enough time to develop, and will often even run into the backs of his blocks due to being too impatient. In general, I think he could also use a lot more consistency using his blocks downfield, as he's shown the ability to use them well on some plays, and then on others he just completely ignores them. I also think he can do a better job pressing the line of scrimmage to get linebackers and safeties off their path and make things easier for himself. Finally, though, he did run with good vision. About 80% of his rushes came on zones last season, and 70% of his career rushes were on zone runs as well. So while I do think he could be a good fit for a gap scheme, he'll need to prove it. But he wouldn't have that ability to be able to prove if he doesn't hold on to the ball, but thankfully he does a fantastic ball avoiding fumbles with, again, 0 fumbles this year and 0 fumbles on 707 career touches, which is, again, just crazy. So he was able to earn a B thanks to his quality vision, especially in zone runs. Also, not surprisingly, he will absolutely earned an A for his ball handling with no fumbles at all in his entire college career. For his future role in athleticism, we again have another 2-down back. The good thing about Monangai is that he's a very effective rusher with great contact balance and vision to be helpful in most schemes. Also, his ability to essentially never fumble the ball could help him secure early down work. While he may not be overly productive as a pass catcher, he could still earn opportunities on pass downs thanks to his good pass blocking skills. The first step to become a good pass catcher is to be on the field for passing downs, so him being able to accomplish that at least helps him go in the right direction. The biggest things that I think could limit his usage is his ability to make defenders miss and his athleticism. While he has good contact balance, he isn't able to make defenders miss, and he may not provide as much upside with the ball in his hands, with his difficulties making defenders miss. Also, his athleticism was underwhelming with a RAS score of just 5.01. Finally, while he may be okay as a pass catcher, it is hard to know how much he could be trusted with more volume if he's given the opportunity. So due to being another back likely limited to being a 2-down back, he earned just a C+ for his future role. Also with his poor athletic testing, he got a red flag for his athleticism or RAS. For a summary of his strengths, he has really good contact balance and power despite his stature. He has really good vision to give him a good floor to at least be a power 2-down back. How much he can do in addition to that depends on his hands, but he was at least reliable in catching the ball in his limited targets. Also, his good pass blocking could open the door to more passing down opportunities and usage in the future, or at the very least help him develop further in that area. That being said, the hope that he becomes a bigger producer in the pass game is just a hope since he has so little career production to make it an easy projection. Also, he still has limitations which could lower his ability to be able to produce as a rusher in the NFL, as he can sometimes rush his approach and be uncreative in open space. Also, his small stature could be a bigger problem in the NFL and limit his ability to break tackles and hold up in pass pro. Right now, his physicality is the biggest thing that keeps him as being viewed as a contributor in my books, but if that goes away then, it's just hard to justify him having too much use, especially with his questionable ceiling. So by taking the average of all his grades, Monangai earned a 2.81 out of 4, which just barely falls in my good role player tier. While Monangai is an exciting rusher, I think he'll most likely be very team dependent on how much of an impact he can have. If he goes to a team that loves to split the workload, I could see him easily sliding into that 2-down back duties and doing very well. However, I have a hard time seeing Monangai play on all 3 downs with his limitations as a pass catcher and in the open field. That may concern a number of teams, and I wouldn't be sorry if that leads him to falling to day 3 of the draft, with a number of backs that have more upside in this class. However, a team could still find a quality contributor if they understand his limitations and look to use him where he works best. As for a comp, I have Damian Harris as Monangai's comp. Similar to Monangai, Harris has a smaller stature but has a lot of power and drive. Both also run with good vision and are underrated pass blockers. Despite being good pass blockers, they aren't the most productive pass catchers and will likely be limited to being 2-down backs. Also have limited athleticism and ability to create an open space, which can make their ceiling questionable. Harris had a bit of an odd career due to injuries derailing a number of seasons and ultimately ending his career. However, in a short time, he was a solid contributor, and I could see Monangai doing the same if he is given the right chance and goes to the right team. Going to our final back of the group, LeQuint Allen from Syracuse. Taking a look at his basic stats, he had solid production on the ground with 1,021 yards and 16 touchdowns, but this is on 228 carries, which equals out to a yards per carry of just 4.5 yards. Now, one of the first thoughts when seeing that poor rushing efficiency is maybe the offensive line played a role in that, which it definitely did to a degree, but he also had just 3 yards after contact per attempt, which is a pretty low mark compared to the other backs in the class. What he was very efficient and productive in, though, was the passing game, as he caught a whopping 64 receptions for 521 yards and 4 touchdowns. He was so productive as a pass catcher that he led all the running backs in the entire FBS in receptions, even had a higher receiving production than some of the lesser receiver prospects in this class. Looking at his highlight games against Miami, Pittsburgh, UNLV, and Georgia Tech, we saw the same inefficiency on the ground as Georgia Tech was the only one of the highlighted games where he averaged 4 or more yards per carry. As a receiver, though, he was very productive in all of them with at least 5 receptions all the highlighted games and getting at least 47 yards in 3 of the 4. His target total for the season likely already shows it, but he was heavily involved as a pass catcher in nearly every game, with 5 receptions in 8 of his 13 games. So to see if his receiving ability helps him overcome his deficits as a rusher, let's start to look at some of his grades. For his contact balance and elusiveness, he does show some nice cutting ability in open space from time to time, and could use some cuts to navigate the interior. Also, while he can struggle with his contact balance, he can get some solid drive when he drops his pass and keeps his legs moving. So at the very least, he does have the physical strength to get the push if he has good technique. Unfortunately, most of the time he often has poor technique and pad level, which hamstrings his ability to finish through contact. He's a very upright runner, which regularly causes him to have poor power and drive. What also makes things worse is his legs will often stall when he takes on contact, which gives an easy win to the defender and costs the team's yards. He needs to work to be more proactive against contact, as he often doesn't adjust his body for contact, making it more difficult to slide off hits. In addition to being more proactive, he also needs to be more creative in open space, as he often didn't use too many moves in open space, and the times he did, he would often have poor timing and not cleanly escape the tackle. Also, he sometimes seemed a bit stiff when trying to make his move, and in his change of direction ability, which also made it difficult for him to be able to avoid defenders and make the miss in the open field. So starting things out on a sour note, Allen earned just a D+ for his contact balance and a C+ for his elusiveness. Let's see if his receiving grades bring his head back above waters. For his receiving and pass blocking, he has quick, reliable hands and can make really impressive adjustments to balls that are off target. He has very strong hands to also finish catches through contact and is very comfortable attacking the ball and catching it away from his frame. He is also comfortable running a variety of routes out wide and from the slot, as he regularly did that in the season. He's capable of making some really quality cuts in his routes to regularly beat linebackers and often have a chance against safeties and corners. He also has good awareness in open field and can seek this out on choice routes. When he makes the catch, he has very smooth transition, which he pairs with solid acceleration to be able to quickly pick up yards after the catch. That makes him a good contributor down the field, but also makes him excellent on screen plays. What also makes him good on screen plays is his good eye for setting and reading blocks downfield. He's able to stay on the field for most plays thanks to his contribution to the pass game and a pass catcher, but also as a blocker. Honestly, he was really bad as a blocker in the beginning of the season, but he really grew from the point where he went from a liability to a major asset as a blocker. His recognition skills significantly sped up and his anger got much better as he had more of a focus on his base and timing with his hits. While his pass blocking greatly improved as the season went on, he still can sometimes overcommit, which leads him to have some off-target blocks if the blocker anticipates the block coming. Also, he can still duck a bit too often and can still sometimes struggle to properly time his hip roll. So with much more positive grades now, Allen earned an A for his receiving and an A- for his pass blocking. For his vision and ball handling, he ran a good mix of zone and gap runs, which helps him have experience in both. Also, as I mentioned before, he's very good at using his blocks in the open field. However, the rest leaves a lot to be desired. He has a hard time accurately reading the leverage of his blocks around the line of scrimmage and just didn't look comfortable running between the tackles. This led to a number of times when he just bounced for his runs outside instead of finding an opening in the middle. It was just so disappointing to see how overwhelmed he would seem to get when things got congested around the line of scrimmage, and was just also disappointed to see how badly he would miss some big cutback lane opportunities. In general, he also seemed to really struggle in zone runs and may be better suited for a gap-heavy team. He also needs to get better synergy with his offensive line, as he would try to hug his blocks but would often bump into his blockers, which staggered his runs. Also, he often kept his runs at one speed, which also made it easier for pursuing linebackers to stop him. So while his vision wasn't good, he at the very least rarely fumbled, with just one fumble all season on 292 total touches. So before, we got either all bad or all great for each group, but this time we got a mixed bag with a D+ for his vision and A- for his ball handling. For his future role in athleticism or RAS, I feel we again have a player who may be best suited for specific situations, and specifically passing downs for Allen's case. He is a fantastic pass catcher and has become very impressive as a pass blocker to make it hard to take him off the field on passing downs. And has good eye for blocks on screen plays, and he seems like a perfect third down back in most situations. Now, I say most situations because he just really struggles as a rusher, and I don't know if I would trust him in short yardage situations. Honestly, it might be hard to trust him in general as a rusher with the amount of times he flubbed reads and killed a play. Also, while some pass catching backs have electric athleticism to justify the growing pains of running the football, I think Allen's just an okay, maybe slightly above average athlete, and he didn't do many tests at the combine other than his jumps, but those were just about average. So if he felt those were going to be things that would look really good, and that's what he should do at the combine, and he was just okay, it makes me really worried how he would test it for everything else. Also, just on film, he just looks like he has okay speed and does have some stiffness, as I mentioned before. So he likely is at worst case a receiving back, but I'm just not optimistic in him contributing too much as a rusher. So due to being limited as a rusher, he earned just a C+ for his future role. Also, while I do have some guessing, I'd bet that he's closer to being a yellow flag athlete than a green flag athlete. As a summary of his strengths, while his vision to line of scrimmage can falter, his vision at the second level is really great and lends to his ability to contribute on screen and swing passes. Also, he has some good cutting ability to give him some shiftiness, but can also help him navigate around traffic. While a lot of running backs often need the ball thrown to their frame to make the catch, Allen is very comfortable making catches away from his frame and has receiver-like catch radius. He also has really good route running traits and is capable of running a diverse route tree, including routes down the field to add the impact that he can have on passing downs. He was able to make even more impact on passing downs in the second half of the year, even when he wasn't getting the ball thanks to his pass blocking taking a big step forward. So it's good that Allen can make so much of an impact in passing game, since he struggles to do so as a rusher. His vision is just very poor and he runs with no tempo, which makes me concerned that he just doesn't have a good feel for finding openings or how to create his own. Also, he really struggles avoiding tackles due to being too upright of a runner, and has very little creativity in open space. Finally, while he did make improvements in pass protection, he still has work to do on not ducking and overcommitting to have less reps that the defender just slips right past him. So by taking the average of all his grades, Allen earned a 2.67 out of 4, which just barely falls in my may have a future role tier. Allen might be a glass is half full or half empty type of situation for people and teams. On one hand, he's a great receiving back and should be able to instantly come in on week 1 and help a team, especially with his improved pass protection skills. However, on the other hand, he really seems to struggle as a rusher, especially in the interior, and his poor contact balance and average at best elusiveness makes it hard to justify giving him the ball on plays other than passes. As I mentioned, he did greatly improve his pass blocking, so maybe there's hope that he does the same for his contact balance and or elusiveness in the future. However, I just didn't see any improvements during this season, so I'm less optimistic that could happen. As for a comp, I have Bilal Powell as Allen's comp. Both Powell and Allen are great pass catchers who are comfortable running more complex routes from the slot and out wide. Also, both are very reliable in pass protection to have a chance to steal every third down and long for an NFL team. Unfortunately, both have very poor escapability skills and poor vision, which makes it hard for them to be meaningful contributors on the ground. Also, both were solid but not great athletes, which also makes it harder for them to overcome their deficits. Allen will likely fall in the draft due to his struggles as a rusher, but if he goes to the right team with a vision of how to use him primarily in passing downs, I could see him thriving and having a solid NFL career as a committee back. And that's all for this set of backs. Let me know what your thoughts are on all the backs in the comments and who you think I'm too high or too low on. This is now part 4 of 7, so we're slightly over halfway through, but there are still a lot more evals that'll be coming out soon. So be sure you don't miss any of them, be sure to subscribe. While you're at it, like the video as it would help the channel and series grow thanks to you. And if you want just a written form of the eval, you can subscribe to my Substack as I'll have the full written eval out for each player at the same time as the video. But thank you all and see you all next time.